Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, June 5th. It is 5:32 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move that we adopt the agenda.
Ready? Were there any items to be added? Seeing none, please go ahead and vote. I'm sure that'll be fine while that's processing there, which will only take a sec. That is unanimously in favor. Thank you. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago we had each of you here. Welcome once again, this time to present the annual report for 2022. Our chair of the Lacombe Police Commission, Corey Gish, and Lacombe Police Service Chief, Lauren Bloomhagen. Thank you very much for both being here. Just a reminder to please use the microphone for those watching online. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Council for having us. Of course, this is part of our responsibility is to make sure that we have our annual report and present it to Council. I know that you do have it in your agenda package, but the Chief and I would like to just highlight a few points. So for us, on behalf of the Commission, we had a very busy 2022. The Commission volunteers put in a lot of hours. We worked on a new strategic plan, adopting the key performance indicator process. Grateful as well to the city for helping us through that process and introducing us to Brenda Vaughn to help us coordinate with the KPI process that the city is doing as well. We also did by every 2 years, we do a full interview process with the police service in the chief's evaluation. And so several of the members of our commission spent many hours processing that. So it was a big year last year in 2022. So coming up in 2023, we've also had a lot of new things coming up. We have Bill 6 been proclaimed, and the commission is working through some of the processes required to make the amendments that we need to make with the Police Amendment Act. And we are also looking forward to continuing to work with Director of Corporate Services to work through some of the things that we might be needing to change in Bylaw 78. So again, I think the group of us will be spending quite a bit of time together in the next bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about the commission members. I'm feeling that we're very fortunate to have a very robust commission. We've got a lot of people who are heavily participating, and I just couldn't be more pleased with the content. So I'd given you a little bit in my report, just a little bit of background so that you could know who some of the people are. Of course, there are people who've been involved in the community and community events heavily throughout our time in Lacombe. So that would be myself and Sonia Dykeslag and John Soderberg. We have two people on commission who are newer to our community, Ken Kulak, who brings in experience as an RCMP officer, and so we're so pleased to have that, and a woman named Elaine Willett Larson, who joined our committee in 2020, but who brings a really great governance experience and experience through the school system, through the Catholic school system. And we also have a younger member, Cam Penstone, who is turning into he'll be a pretty amazing leader. So we're feeling like we're working on our succession plan fairly well. We did receive notice of our provincial appointment. And so Mr. Steve Christie joined us just at the last meeting. We got notice of his appointment in time to invite him to our last commission meeting. And he's blending in very well. Again, we don't have a lot of guidance from the province about many things, and I think our provincial appointee understands that process and will work with us to help make sure that I think our biggest concern, as I said, is succession in our matrices, so that we have a commission that has skills that are required, and so we'll continue. So mostly just a message of excitement and satisfaction with the group that we're involved in, and again, just appreciative of the ongoing relationship we have with the city of Lacombe. And want to commend again the people that we're working with, and appreciate having both Ms. McKinnon and Ms. Boucher at our meetings.
Here,
Okay,
if you're done.
I am done.
Excellent. Thank you, and I'm honored to present our 2022 annual report for the service. And once again, I want to thank the various departments of the city. First of all, you might notice the format change of our annual report that's in alignment with the cities, and thank you for Community Services for assisting in reformatting and sprucing up the document to what you see today. And again, thank you to Corporate Services for all of your engagement through our meetings and throughout the year operationally, and our Finance Department for keeping us on track on budget. And it's been a really good relationship, and I think it's been advantageous for all of us. Going through the statistics of the report, I'll comment on some of our staffing, our various positions. When it comes to our calls received, our overall calls for service in 2022 were 5,732 calls for service, which represents a 3.8% decrease from 2021. That's 7% below the 5-year average. However, coming out of the pandemic, there's a few anomalies with a number of our stats as we go through the report, and be open to ask or answer any questions that you may have as we do go through some of the statistical data within the report. 2022, our organizational structure remained the same as presented on the screen, and there weren't any changes. However, when we get into our human resources, our authorized strength remained at 22 police members plus the 1 alert member position, 9 full-time staff and 5 casual civilian support staff, as well as 5 casual guards and 1 casual office maintenance personnel. We did have 4 new hires: Constable LaGrange, Constable Zelmer, Constable Walker, and Constable Parent, and that was to facilitate retirements and other departures from the service through resignations or other leaves. When we look at our overall years of service for our members, you can see that we've got a fairly good cross-section of years of service, 5 members with less than 2 years service, 3 between 2 and 4 years, 5 between 5 and 9 years service, 6 between 10 and 19, and 4 with 20 plus years of policing experience, which creates for a well-rounded environment and various competence capacities. Our new members bring a lot of new energy to the service, and our senior members provide guidance and knowledge. Some of our operational highlights. I'm going to get right into the various areas. I've already commented on our total calls for service being down from 2021. And as I previously said, through the pandemic, we did come out of the pandemic and some of the restrictions early in 2022, but then combined with some of our shortages in staffing or vacancies with 4 members in training throughout the year and some other leaves, some of our self-generated operational work was down. So as we stabilize coming into 2023, we anticipate that those numbers will return to normal and be consistent with other city growth. When we get into the various crime types, our property crime, you'll notice that in many areas we are down from the previous year of 2021 and somewhat down from the 5-year averages in most categories. When we look at break and enters,
there was an increase of 19%, but overall still down 5% on 5-year average. A lot of these break and enters were business compound break and enters, and we tend to see those trends throughout the spring of the year and during the warmer months. Our frauds were down significantly, and a lot of those were online frauds, and also in the area of harassment. Some of those numbers, we noticed some fairly significant increases in years past. However, through local and provincial-wide fraud awareness campaigns, it would appear that we're seeing fewer of those types of offenses being committed. We look at a significant increase on our possession of stolen property, 93%, still down 3% over the 5-year average, but some of the proactive work by our members in stopping vehicles during the wee small hours of the night or other time, they are stopping vehicles and finding stolen property, weapons, drugs, those types of things. So through our proactive initiatives, we're seeing some of those offenses being identified. The theft over is down 3% and 20% over the 5-year average, which when you compare the possession of stolen property to the theft overs, there's a deterrent factor in stopping vehicles and finding stolen property that may not have been stolen from our community, could have been stolen from our community and others. So it may not, the two may not go hand in hand when you look at the statistics. Going into the next area, other crimes, the breach of court orders, up 29% and up over the 5-year average. That is all proactive work. So when we get bail notices or probation notices on previous offenders, we follow up on those. We will do a door knock where people are out on curfew conditions. We will follow up, ensure people are following those conditions. So there again, proactive work that we're not just waiting to come across people after the fact. We're actively checking on individuals that are bound by court orders. And then we get into the good news on disturbing the peace, 26% down. The obstruct and arrest, a 0% increase, which is good for our members. Weapons offenses, though, 209% increase. And that's a provincial trend that we're seeing across the board. A lot of these weapons offenses are, again, coming from these proactive stops where we're finding stolen or unregistered weapons in vehicles or through search warrants or on persons. And that is very much reflective of our members being out there 24/7 and checking on people, not waiting for the calls to come in and just completely responding.
Excuse me, Chief, on that particular one, because it is important for people to understand, a weapons-related offense does not necessarily mean a gun in hand during a crime for the purpose of crime. It's just that a person has an illegal firearm, perhaps in their vehicle or in their home or wherever it is that have been caught. That's what that number represents.
Correct. All weapons offenses. So when we stop a vehicle, it's and we find cocaine and other drugs, often we're finding firearms or restricted weapons of various types.
Thanks.
In the area of drugs, 24% increase. All of these proactive measures go hand in hand, and that's where we're finding fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, and GHB as some of our primary drugs that we're finding. The cannabis, in past years with the legalization of cannabis, we saw significant decreases in our overall drug charges. Those charges specific to cannabis would fall under the provincial acts now. So the 24% increase is because of those drugs we're finding on persons of interest or in our various interactions. Impaired driving, a significant increase of 40%. A lot of that is due to the changes to administrative sanctions for impaired driving over criminal code infractions. It's much easier for us to enforce the provincial administrative sanctions, reflecting in higher numbers of occurrences and observances by our members that lead to additional sanctions. Criminal driving is also up, but because we're out there enforcing the administrative sanctions, some of our impaired driving cases that are followed up with criminal charges, but also some of the follow-up, we have a number of criminal flights on a fairly regular basis where we're following up, identifying drivers and following up with charges against the individuals that are fleeing from police. So that is included in those criminal driving offenses. Fortunately, our occurrences of mental health continue to go up marginally year after year. We're very focused on this area. We've worked with provincial bodies to create a mental health call line for police to assist in apprehension, conveyance, but also finding alternatives to apprehending and conveying people suffering from mental disorders or conditions. And we're also planning on continuing work to implement a system that's called Health IM that'll help police officers assess mental health calls for service that's tied directly into our designated facilities and healthcare centers so that we can make better judgments, more informed, and access professional individuals that are trained in assessing individuals with mental health conditions. And that can be done from our cell phones or vehicles once implemented. So. Getting into some of our crimes against persons, robberies 0% increases, but however, the numbers have been consistent at fairly low at 2 over the last few years. Those could be personal robberies or commercial robberies. Excuse me. Assault. Throughout the pandemic, we were concerned about the number of assaults increasing. And even when we get to areas of domestic violence, where actually we have seen decreases in those areas, which is notable. Those offenses are hard for us to deter because of a number of factors or predict. However, through education and some of other activities, they seem to be working. And then you'll notice the harassments are down about 22% as well. The threats and harassment, some of that is associated to online threats and harassment, which managing social media, we are seeing more complaints in those areas, and we are taking steps to adapt and train individuals within the service to deal with internet-based crimes. When we get into our traffic statistics, our high collision locations continue to be in the area of Highway 2A and Woodland Drive, Highway 12 and 50th Avenue. And the various times of those occurrences are between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. When you look at the breakdown on traffic incidents, fatalities remained at 0 for the last 5 years, which is notable. Traffic collisions, we're on a slight increase. However, we are working our way back to pre-pandemic levels when we look at the current 2023 stats. A lot of the reason for this was part of the lockdown, but throughout 2022, there's still a lot of people working from home and people weren't as mobile as they were in previous years. Our hit and runs are down slightly over the previous year, and those numbers do fluctuate from year to year. We would anticipate with the development of the city and the various new developments on the west end that some of those hit and run collisions would increase because many of them are in parking lots and those types of areas of the city. Our injury collisions went up as well. Sorry. Oh, my slides
I
are.
moved you.
We had 15 in 2022, which was up from 11 in 2021 and 10 in 2020. So there again, we're returning to some of the pre-pandemic levels and increase in traffic volumes. Overall traffic enforcement, some of the statistics, it looks very inconsistent. We can blame the pandemic for some of it and the movements of people, but when we look at 2022 being down fairly significantly over 2021, part of that is our self-generated traffic enforcement initiative. So we had 4 members in training throughout the years. We had a few other leaves that were long-term. So with 25% of our staff not contributing to some of that self-generated work, we see those numbers decline. So a lot of that is purely operational capacity for our members that may be dealing with other issues and not as focused on some of that self-generated traffic work. So we're hoping now that we're stabilizing that area that those numbers will return to normal. Next slide, there's a reference to a 2019 community survey, which put us in favorable standing with the community. And this is something we recognize already. We have a very supportive community when it comes to policing. And overall, 82% felt we were doing a good job overall, which with a number of variables in policing, defund police movements and some of the other challenges we've seen, we've still maintained fairly good standing overall within our community. The commission has just conducted a new survey, which will be finalized in June, and we'll await those results from the current survey. And to date, I haven't seen any preliminary numbers on that survey. Throughout 2022, we spent many hours with the commission developing a new strategic plan to be implemented in 2023 to 2026, with our priorities being in alignment with the City of Lacombe strategic plan, and also within our police standards and audit requirements. Priorities revolve around being well-governed, managed budgets, service strength, crime management, and community integration. Those don't change significantly from our previous priorities. All of them have been at the forefront for our strategic plans for some time.
Excuse me, Chief. With respect to the governance one, the well-governed and community representation, given the input or the changes from the, is it Bill 6, I think it was, that made it possible for the province to appoint a portion of the committee, I think 3 members, which is half less 1 members for 3. There's been 1 thus far. And I was just wondering if that department has been any clearer with their expectations as to how that will unfold, and any kind of a schedule.
They have been completely silent. So there's been, there was a reach out from the minister's office to me just to say, hey, we're here for you. Could we see your matrices? And it sounded like there was going to be some great communication and cooperation in helping build procedures and processes and expectations. And then our next communication was, oh, by the way, here's your appointee. So I think that some things got rushed before the writ dropped, and then now we just haven't heard anything more. So I think through the Association of Police Governance, we're definitely lobbying and canvassing for assistance so that we can participate in some of the processes. But mostly we're sitting here being told we're not being communicated with yet.
Okay, well, at least they're consistent in that regard.
That's true. So that's
item.
how much you've had,
So
sir, Mr. Mayor?
It is. The reason I brought it up, and I did know the answer, but I wanted you to say it so that we are consistent. It has been suggested by a few members in our community that this was done because of some sort of incompetence or something, whatever they were, it was nonsense anyway. But I wanted to say it publicly that this was in no way, shape, or form a reflection of the performance of the Lacombe Police Commission. This was a provincial-wide thing and was outlined to me by Minister Ellis that this was trying to come up with some form of a level playing field throughout the province for consistency purposes. So I just wanted to lay that to rest, that this was somehow some sort of, I don't know, punishment or an acknowledgement of improper behavior or whatnot on behalf of the commission as a whole. So.
Well, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think that we've felt that we've understood that as well, that this is a political change, that there's a determination that police commissions are important. We are representing the community. We are ensuring independence of the police service. And so that through the Police Act, if that's what the province decided, that they needed to make sure that they had the right to appoint members to the commission to ensure that that fundamental role was completed, then I guess we defer to our seniors or defer to our the people who have power over us.
That's exactly right, and I'm glad we're on the same page with that. It's unfortunate when some people jump to conclusions and come up with ideas that hold no water, and in this case, it had nothing to do with past performance of the commission. So thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
And just on that, Mayor Creasy, there was also the standing up of a number of additional commissions and policing boards across the province. So the standing commissions around the province were doing great work, which was recognized. And I think the province recognized that additional commissions were needed in other areas. So it was because of the good work of our local commission, I think, that spawned some of the other movement in this area throughout the province. So. Moving on to budget revenues and expenditures. We've reviewed the budget in its entirety when council approves it. So unless anybody has any questions on the breakdown, this isn't any new information for you. And we are meeting our budget expectations. Some of the new areas that were implemented in 2022 through provincial requirements, we are, as policing agencies, are now required to report on what was commonly known as street checks. This was an issue in other areas of North America and in Eastern Canada. It really wasn't that big of an issue here in Alberta, but the public perception on the practice of street checks and in other jurisdictions called carding did come to the forefront. And In our community, we always felt the expectation was that if you saw somebody walking in an alley at 3 a.m. or behind a business, that the police would check and see what they were doing. And that was part of the expectations for our members. And we were doing that. However, there are new requirements for us when we do that. A person has the ability to not talk to the police, and they've always had that opportunity, and it has been respected. But anytime we do have those interactions, we have to report to the province annually. We have to provide training. We have to show proof that the training has been completed by all of our members. We have to present the annual report to the commission, and we have to publish that report to the public or make it available to the public. And then we also have to have a public awareness campaign on what the rights of an individual would be in regards to street checks and carding. We have complied with all the requirements in this regard. However, the public's awareness campaign, we are going to be reliant somewhat on the province and other agencies to do any of the big advertising in relation to the requirements of this legislation. We will post information to our website, and we have met our requirement with our reporting back to the province. Through this practice, what we have done is actually reduced our street checks to 0. However, we're actually accurately scoring what those interactions are, whether it's a suspicious person vehicle or a suspicious person driving through a industrial area is different than just a random street check where there's no reason for the officer's involvement or stopping to talk to that person. So it basically we're articulating better why we're doing what we're doing.
So, Chief, if I could ask a question, I've read through this a couple times. Are carding and street checks the same thing then?
In my mind, no.
Okay.
In many areas and beliefs, they are, and there's differing opinions even through various governments that we've seen in the last few years that have reviewed this issue. So.
Okay. However it works out, as long as you're doing it legally, I can tell you from everyone that I hear from, what they appreciate the monitoring of the community that you do. And as long as it's done to those standards you have to abide by. I'm not necessarily sure I care what the name of it is, but thank you for doing it.
And we're very much committed to that proactive approach to policing, that if we see something that we consider suspicious, that we're going to check it out. One of our other requirements is to report on annual complaints, concerns, or compliments and our professional standards. We do have a public complaints director on the commission who receives complaints. In this area, in 2022, the police service initiated an internal review, and 5 community members brought forward complaints or concerns. In the one the service brought forward, that was resolved through internal guidance and performance supplements. One external complaint, alleged of discreditable conduct and a breach of confidence against an officer. That investigation is being held in abeyance due to criminal matters that the complainant is working through the criminal courts. And 4 misconduct complaints were not received as they didn't meet any of the requirements that we have under the Police Act. So we go through organizational awards and recognition. There's a long list of many of our staff and sworn and non-sworn personnel received various awards for long service, Queen Platinum Jubilee medals, long service medals, and then we had a number of advancements in classification for our sworn members in the various ranks. Wasn't a recognition, however, I think it was a real compliment to the service that we did host the Alberta Community Justice Awards in 2022. Those were awards going to various recipients throughout the province from the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General. And that was the first time that this ceremony that's held annually was held outside of the major centers of Edmonton and Calgary. And it was very well received. Everybody that worked on this initiative throughout the city, the police service and Solicitor General's Department did a fantastic job. And now this event will be regularly hosted by smaller communities throughout the province.
So just as a side note to that, I think police in general are rarely given the opportunity to be considered as ambassadors for the community. That event, I had more positive feedback at it that day and afterwards than I ever dreamt possible. So tourism and promoting our community is not just up to the business community. Thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on to community involvement. Of course, we continue to have our school resource officer program, and thanks to our partner agencies for their contributions in support and financial contributions to that program. Our victim services unit, I want to thank the board and volunteers for the thousands of hours they spend assisting victims of crime on a various number of levels, whether it be property crimes or crimes against persons. They also help and assist us in our charity check stop every year, which we raise in the area of $8,000 a year, which goes towards victim service, but other initiatives like Big Brothers and Sisters, Kids and Cops program, and MAD. So we appreciate all of their efforts, and they're very supportive on a daily basis. And I believe on Friday, the 23rd of June, they are having an anniversary for, oh boy, I was going to say 40 years of service.
Like how
Excuse me if I'm wrong.
Like,
yeah, on the exact number, but I believe an invitation has gone out to council on that. 30 years, thanks. But there has been an invitation go out for a barbecue that'll be hosted at the police station. Now, our Kids and Cops program was suspended for 1 year during the pandemic, but did resume in 2022, and that's in cooperation with Big Brothers and Sisters, our service, the Town of Black Falls Community Peace Officers and RCMP. And every year it's filled to capacity, and we're glad to report that program will be running again this year. So, and then the Lacombe Community Watch, who was a culmination of a variety of crime prevention initiatives and groups, unfortunately disbanded due to lacking volunteer numbers. And unfortunately, that is a significant impact on the service as far as our crime prevention initiatives. So we are hoping that that group will come back and provide service to the community again. And to end, there's a few photos from Kids and Cops, also some of the other initiatives, McHappy Day. We try and take in the events with some of our local businesses, And we get a lot of support from some of our community businesses for various initiatives. So thank you to all the community support in all of those areas. And that is the 2022 annual report.
Well, thank you both. Chair Gish, I just wanted to highlight the message that you put forward here and recognize the team. I think if we're being honest, the relationship between the Lacombe Police Commission has not maybe always been as rosy as what we'd like. And the improvement that I think that myself and council have seen as a result of the better communication and the hard work that and time and effort that's went into it on behalf of especially yourself, but on behalf of the commission and our senior staff, whatnot, is truly appreciated. So thank you very much for that. I just thought it was kind of told the story in that letter about how you recognize the whole team and the work that everybody's done. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody, hopefully everybody in the community gets a chance to read that. It looks like we've got a question or two as well. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I have a couple comments first, and then I do have a couple questions. So yeah, I would definitely echo, I loved actually reading this report. It was very readable. It was full of information. I love all the graphics, the pictures, even some art that unfortunately wasn't identified as who did it, but it was really neat on the chief's message in particular. The graphics are just so helpful for people to understand. So again, I just go back to that very readable. This is something that residents should be able to pick up and, you know, be able to read it and have some confidence in what's happening in our community. And I think this definitely delivers to that. I really appreciate the comments, especially around the victim services unit. That's one of those areas that you don't know until you know, unfortunately. And the good work that they do in this community, I don't think is not honestly recognized enough. And so I just really want to give an extra shout out just to those very dedicated, amazing people that shoulder a lot of terrible things, honestly. And I just really think that's worth underscoring. So the two questions I did have, one, you touched a little bit on the mental health, being a sort of an increase in calls for that. I'm just wondering, probably anecdotally, if you have any insight as to, is it just overall the same thing is expanding, or is there certain segments, like sort of subcategories of that mental health that you're seeing more calls on?
Really good question. We're very engaged in a number of areas in this, and I sit on the Provincial Mental Health Police Advisory Committee, steering committee, and we're always assessing what is happening in this environment, and it's fairly consistent throughout the province as far as the increases in this area, to the extent that health is actually funding the implementation of the Health IM screening tool for police, which has never been done before. So we've done a lot of lobbying and work in that area. The other thing that contributes to changes in policing, but in this area, is our approach to apprehending offenders. Is we're dealing with a variety of offenders who are also dealing with mental health and addiction issues. And we're struggling as police agencies as to how we find supports for people on addictions, but don't provide excuses or miss the accountability piece on taking responsibility for your actions in relation to crimes you commit. So that is a very active discussion going on, not only locally, but provincially and nationally as well. And the thing that we're asking for is more wraparound services when it comes to mental health, so we can do our policing job, and the professionals that deal with mental health and addictions can be looking after some of the underlying causes that lead to crime in our community. Because really, when we get to the police involvement, we're really at the end point. So those are very topical discussions. They're very active discussions as now. And we do have the implementation of new drug courts in Red Deer as well. Those used to be in Edmonton and Calgary, but they have started them in Red Deer as well, and we're involved in those processes as well.
Okay. And then just my one last question is just in regards to constables in particular. You mentioned, first through fourth class, just someone who's obviously not a serving police officer. I don't understand the differentiation. And if you could just elaborate on what that actually means, those different classes, just for curiosity.
Sure. So if you start as a recruit constable, that would be a 5th class constable, and then your next increment would be 4th class until you get to 1st class constable, where when we're in negotiations, all our salary grid is based off that first percentages of 1st class constable. And then after 8 years, you can go up to a senior level 1 constable, and then up to a senior level 2, which is the highest of the constable levels at 10 years. And then you get into promoted ranks of sergeant, staff sergeant, and chief in our organization would be the promoted ranks.
So in addition to that, is the level of constables, is that just an indication of time served, or is there, I don't know, testing or education components that go along with that?
For the most part, it's years served. However, they are based on performance reviews and evaluations for the majority of those categories.
Great, thanks.
And one thing I just wanted to mention, because I forgot and didn't speak to it anywhere in the report, was just our crime severity index at 51.4 was down from 60.5. Both numbers were very favorable and put us in the category of safe cities for all of Canada, and especially in Alberta. So we're very proud to see that number come down year after year. And we hope that 2023 will see even better numbers. But I think as far as promoting the city, that's one thing that citizens coming to Lacombe definitely talk about, is the safety of the community. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you for remembering that. That is important.
That I overbid.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. To elaborate further on that, obviously you have compiled all statistics, and we're all advocates of our great service in our community. But if I understand correctly, it's communities 1 to 300, populations over 10,000. So then 1 being unfortunately the worst, 300 being the best. And historically in the past, it came up if we were at 220 or something like that. That's kind of a number to brag about, I guess, when people ask us about our community, is we are, have an excellent crime severity index. And I know you just elaborated that number, but how would that rank us in 1 to 300? So you can kind of simplify the statistics to how we are comparably, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we're at 193 for communities across Canada with a population over 10,000. That includes all provinces, including the eastern provinces. When we look at, so it's a very favorable number, but when you compare it to other municipalities in Alberta is where we really shine when you're comparing really same legislation, varying crime rates and whatnot. We are sitting much better than the 193 when we compare it provincially.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd also like to speak to that. The farmers market, the last time we worked it, I was talking to a young woman. She was like in her 50s. That's why I say she's young. Anyway, she moved here because of how safe our community is, and you should take credit for that. I mean, people are hearing about Lacombe and how safe it is, and it's really important to us as a community in general, and certainly brings people to come and live here. I'd also like to talk about the school resource officer and how important that is, and to keep our young people engaged with police in a positive manner and not a negative manner. And I think that's really important. And if anybody's not been to the Kids and Cops wind up, it's a lot of fun, and it's to see them get their prizes and recognition for doing certain things with the police that week is really a joy, and I will be there again this year. And thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Councillor Conick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I know Councillor Hoekstra has alluded to it in her reports, and I just can't remember now. But I'm just looking for a bit of an update, and I don't know if that's through legislation or not, but the whole idea of the body cameras. I'm wondering if you could just give an update. Do we have some? Do we not? Are we required to get all of them? Where are those costs coming from? All good stuff like that.
So post-election, we're awaiting those answers. So it has been mandated. We are researching costs associated to that. We have not received any commitment from the provincial government on whether they're going to support any of the funding of that initiative or whether we will bear the entire cost. So we are represented on a provincial committee specific to body-worn cameras, the policies, the requirements, but also researching various costs associated to that as well. So we know what's coming. One thing that we are a little bit ahead of the game on is for a few decades now, we have had in-car video systems, which the majority of services have not. So we're used to a lot of that video evidence, just not in the vast amounts that body-worn cameras would take. So in the area of accountability, body-worn cameras are a great implementation. Where we have been reluctant to move forward in the past was on not only the cost, but the court process and disclosure of the evidence and what to disclose and what not to disclose, because there is a significant amount of hours spent by staff vetting various evidence, and the rules of evidence around body-worn recordings is still not clear to this day, but we will be rolling forward whether that piece is worked out or not. So stay tuned.
Does anyone have any additional comments or questions for either presenter? A relatively early night. Once again, thank you both for coming to present. Chair Gish, I know that you do a little work outside of the commission as well. I'm being facetious. I really appreciate the time and effort that goes into fulfilling the position that you have excelled at.
Well, and I have said it back to council before, it's definitely worthwhile work. I appreciate getting this chance to be involved in the community, and I think that I can say the same on behalf of the commission as well, that we're glad to be able to participate.
Wonderful. Thank you both. So next up, we have the updated strat plan for 23 through 26 for the next 3 years. CEO Gowdy, you're leading this item.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor Creasy and members of council. So this evening, it's my pleasure to present an update. Normally, I would say in one of the annual updates, but this one did take a little bit longer to get together. And part of that was the introduction of a new process, which I'll go through here. So in the past, the strategic planning process has been very top-down. And so it's really gathering and coalescing council's strategic priorities and then disseminating that through the strategic plan to administration. We then develop actions that we believe directly support those strategic priorities and present them back to you. This year, one of the things that we have seen in previous employee satisfaction surveys is that sometimes there's a lack of connection amongst staff sort of below that manager level in the organization with the strategic plan, a lack of connection, a lack of awareness. And we wanted to provide an opportunity to both increase the awareness and connection with the strategic plan and make sure that we're providing a consistent opportunity for grassroots up tactics to develop that would support council's strategic plan. And so it hasn't been a really good process in the past for, let's say I'm a member of the Parks Department And I say, well, something that would really help me with my work is if the GIS department created a work order system for me. And so it's difficult in an organization like a municipality to get corporate support, corporate level support for those complex tasks that are interdepartmental or interdivision. And so we did introduce a new process where we first gathered at the manager level, would meet with their team and talk about things that are going on, priorities within the department, to see what do people actually working on these things day to day see as priorities that would support, and how might that fit in with council's priorities. Those were then coalesced by the managers. The directors met with them and said, well, here's, some of the connections we see. This is a good idea, but it might be something for the future. And then we met as a corporate leadership team and went through those as well. And so that was quite a extensive exercise, and you generate hundreds of possible good ideas, and they're all good ideas. Part of the challenge as the corporate leadership team is you can't support all the good ideas. You can only support the best ideas and those that align, that we see strong alignment with council's objectives. So a lot of the exercise is actually saying no to good ideas, which can be challenging, but I think it was a good exercise. It did result in a little bit of a longer process as we went through it for the first time. So I want to acknowledge the work you're seeing before you was a team lift from all levels, actually, of the organization. There is a lot of work behind the scenes. Of course, you're only seeing kind of the iceberg of the status updates, that sort of thing. But the 25 pages of tactics being reported on in very succinct little bits does represent hundreds of hours of work across the municipality. And thank you to the directors and, of course, any staff that I know some choose to watch these. So thank you for the hard work. And I know that council acknowledges that as well. This is a team effort. This isn't something that I have put together behind the scenes. I'm just the organizer of it, I guess. So what I thought I would do to go through this plan is I would go through the new items, the items that have been identified as new, and really just make sure that there's a common understanding of what those items are. The other items have already been presented and adopted by council in previous iterations of the plan. What you're seeing here, the 24-page report, includes all completed items and current items. In future presentations, we're going to be stripping out, like, once we come back to you for actual adoption of the plan at an official council meeting, we'll be stripping out the completed items so that it's not an ever-growing list, and we'll have one document that just documents progress made throughout the term towards your strategic plan. So you'll have a list of completed items, and then separately we'll have a list of current tactics that are supporting council's strategic plan. We don't see a big change in the 4 major pillars of the strategic plan. That is kind of the system we have in place, is that those are adopted at the front end and then of the term, and then kept throughout the term and revisited at the end of the term. Of course, you can change that if you'd like, but it really is in the tactics that the rubber meets the road between those high-level pillars and what you see in the community. So we want to have alignment on those. I know there's some organizations that have a belief that, well, you approve those 4 main pillars and the 12 things under them, and then we'll go and do these hundreds of things on our own, sort of behind the scenes. But I think that while that is more expedient, it also risks a misalignment between administration's actions and council's actual expectations of what they want to see. So with that, maybe I'll pause and just ask if there's any questions about the process first.
I'm just curious, do you have any instances of great ideas that have kind of fallen by the wayside due to being felt that they didn't necessarily align with council's direction. We'd mentioned that there's thousands of good ideas, only great ones come forward, but
I think there are ideas that our council or our, administration has that would be fantastic executions of a different strategic priority. So one we've talked about is many communities target greenhouse gas emissions reductions. You're seeing some declarations of states of emergency about climate change from major cities around Canada. That is not something that we've seen in our strategic objectives. And so I'm sure there were, and none come to mind immediately, but I know that there was a number of greenhouse gas emission reducing strategies that we did have to say no to, where we said, well, if that was the goal, GHG emission reduction, that's a great strategy, but what we're looking for is GHG emission reduction that makes financial sense as well. It has to stand on its own. And so we said, well, strictly reducing emissions with no corresponding financial benefit, that doesn't actually fit in with the objectives that have been identified in your strategic plan. And so I know we looked at, in that area, we would look at ones that targeted better alignment with council level.
great example. Thanks.
Okay, so I will begin on page 1. I'm going to stop at the end of each page just to provide an opportunity for any comments, questions, whatever you may have. But I am going to highlight the ones that are listed new, and I will give just a very brief couple of sentences on each one. Again, this is a committee meeting, so feel free to jump in anytime. There's no official presentation here. We're all quite knowledgeable about the areas, so we should be able to answer them. So the first one is under collaborating with community stakeholders on community economic development. We've had some discussion with the Berman School of Business Advisory Board about the desire to have a stronger connection between both that advisory board and the city, and specifically to have a council member sit on that advisory board, which is made up of citizens and business members in the community. We're going to bring an opportunity for council to consider that in Q3 2023 with an RFD that includes their terms of reference and some of that sort of stuff. Next, we have the Lacombe Athletic Park Association request for land lease amendment. You are aware of this, but it did come up post the adoption of the strategic plan, so it's here. We do expect that there will be a presentation coming from that group, or a request for a presentation, because they have run into some budgetary issues where they're going to have to either address the scope of their project or the budget of their project. So I anticipate that they'll be coming back to council, possibly in a joint meeting format with the county. Is there anything on page 1 that anyone else would like to discuss? Going to page 2. There, we started off with the Rotary, and I believe it might expand beyond the Rotary, Cranna Lake proposal. And so that is a potential community amenity that would be developed at the Cranna Lake trailhead that would be some level of gathering space, warm-up space, maybe some washrooms. It's fairly high level now. Council has seen that information. And so what we're doing right now is developing a project concept memo, which will be a 2 to 3 page project brief that states what the must-have items are, the nice-to-have items, and allows some preliminary pricing, because I know council is interested, but it's tough to know. It's kind of a morphing project right now, and so we want to start tightening that up so that we can move it ahead. One of the things that we had identified was a downtown parking inventory and consultation. So this came up post the adoption of the strategic plan, and we have launched and completed the downtown parking improvement survey. We are completing a field count of downtown parking stalls, and this says council will receive an update in June 2023, and I believe we are still on track for that very thing. July, if that meant, actually, sorry, that was a typo. On July, but this summer we will be coming forward with some results of that. Next, of course, was the heritage land use bylaw updates, and Actually, Manager Hackett was on top of things, and so when she provided the update, we were still planning on May 10th, we were going to bring you the update, which we did, and so that is. There is some work that has completed because these are live projects that are in process. Some of the updates were made at a point in time, and we've actually made subsequent actions since then, and so when possible, I'll note that. And so, as you know, those are coming forward this year to update the land use bylaw accordingly. Lacombe Lodge, we are looking at ways that we can, we have brought some information packages to council, and we're looking at ways that we might be able to advance some joint advocacy on this, and Director LaPointe and I are looking at that right now. You'll see some more information in Q4 of this year, if there hasn't been significant movement to that point. The Wolf Creek School Division partnership opportunities. Again, here, City Administration to present a proposal for council, but of course you have received that proposal and we're awaiting their board review of that same item. Is there any questions on the items on page 2? Sir?
Just curious with the Granite Lake proposal, it's been, I think, maybe come to the forefront of the community, talk about a little more. Is there any other service groups that have expressed interest in being involved with those workshops besides Rotary?
Yes, I believe that there is some level of interest potentially with the Kinsmen. And once the project gets moving, I think it'll gather some other community support. And so we're all quite excited to see if this can get some momentum and if it's supported by the community. But right now I know there's a couple of service groups that are quite interested.
Great. The other one was item G for the downtown parking inventory and whatnot. I think one of the items that was identified, I believe, by a private company was some issues surrounding the removal of abandoned vehicles from private property, and some work that the city might want to contemplate updating some bylaws. Where does that sit now?
It is a standalone item that I'm coming to here, an update on the traffic bylaw. I don't remember which, you know, and I won't guess which page it is, but there is an item specific to that.
Enough said, thank you.
So on to page 3. The only new item there is to update the land use bylaw to ensure conditions for investment attraction. This was actually an update of the R4 district to gently move the needle towards supporting infill while acknowledging the impact on the existing neighborhood and the characteristics of that neighborhood. And of course, council did receive that report, and we are moving through the updates accordingly. So that one has been complete, but it came up after the strategic plan. Is there any items on questions on the existing items on page 2?
Yeah, CEO Gowdy, I just have a question regarding, is this the right opportunity to bring forward the addition to this
Sure, yes.
strategic plan? Okay, I'd like to bring signage for Lacombe, highway signage. So specifically on the west end, or actually north end also. So to approach the province about improving that signage and making it so that when they come into our community, they don't feel like they're going to Stettler. They'll feel like they're coming to Lacombe instead. So if we could look into that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yes. So Councillor Gullickson and I have talked about this before, that there is, it seems like, and we would want to confirm this, but it seems like there's a lack of signage for Lacombe, given the size of the community and the importance of some of the accesses for the all service community we provide. When you're on Highway 2, often you actually don't seem to get notification that Lacombe is a turnoff until kilometers, you know, a couple of kilometers beforehand. And so for long-term Lacombe residents, that's not you forget about it, but when people come to visit, I often actually hear about that same thing, and so that is something we can include in there. Moving on to page number 4, new items include an exploration of the city of Lacombe considering joining the rural renewal stream of immigration, welcoming immigration into the community. And that's going to come to council later this year in Q4. We are looking at reaching out to some, or we have actually connected with some neighboring communities to see, is it suitable for us to do a regional application, or what are some of the benefits, what are some of the risks of doing that? We are looking to update the land use bylaw for ongoing red tape reduction and some clarity improvements around CCANs and home occupation regulations. We have seen some opportunity for tightening up those regulations. And so we want to come to council. We're going to be developing them for your consideration in late 2023, and then looking to start implementing them, if supported, in 2024. We did have this item about the fire department response time report that came up after the adoption of the strategic plan. And so, of course, that has been complete. Council received that report in camera. The 49C concept development, again, this is something that actually came to the forefront after the adoption of the plan. It has been complete, the presentation of the concept to council, and we are continuing to move forward with that. Some grant applications and community consultation, which is underway now. Any questions about those items on page 4? Moving to page 5, there's only one item, and it is the attraction of a national retailer with a building footprint of at least 15,000 square feet. This is on hold right now. I would say the city of Lacombe has seen development greatly exceeding 15,000 square feet in recent years, just not in a single building as of yet. So hopefully soon. Moving on to page 6, we have no new items that have been added there, but I would be happy to answer any questions if there are any on those items. Page 7, we have 3 new items. The first is actually nearing completion, and that is the exploration of a business case for contracted fleet management services. And so we'll be starting a pilot project actually with that right away here. Actually, Director Thompson and I are just finalizing the agreement for, I believe it's a 6 truck pilot for a lease equity approach. And so we'll monitor that to see where the value is for the municipality. I expect there will be some value, but we want to test it out first and just make sure that those assumptions are true. Tree registry. This is something that actually many municipalities are moving towards. I think we're probably on the forefront for municipalities of our size. But given the importance that Lacombe residents place on tree cover, canopy and the importance of trees in general, I think that makes sense. And so we actually are doing this in-house. We've been lucky to get a great staff member who's advancing this on our behalf, who's both proficient at using the GIS tools, but also a certified arborist. So he's able to actually address the health of the tree, or assess the health of the trees, and really add a lot of value that if we went to a contracted model, we would not get. So this is moving ahead actually quite well, and we expect by the end of the year to have this completed, and it'll be a similar asset management approach as we have for roads and pipes, that you'll have a similar understanding of the asset inventory of trees in the municipality.
Gio Gowdy, so just an example of some possible use for that today, just by chance, had an interaction with a developer who was had some issues with some drawing conflicts about the location of trees on a very notable street in the city. And I can't help but think that if in fact we did have a GIS work done on, especially on some of those key streets to start with, that this would have prevented an unfortunate situation.
Prevented or at least clarified so that everyone knew up front what was happening, because that you're right. how is a developer to assess the value of a community tree to the community? I don't mean just dollars. If the city itself actually has no understanding of what it has or what the value is. And so it does move us towards address. I know the exact situation, of course. And yes, we talked about it would really have helped in that situation.
I think there's some solutions in place for it, but it just, if it were in place, I'm just, yeah, confirming this would be a positive thing. Perhaps not for every bush and plant in the entire community, but in some of the important streets and some of the bigger trees, it will be useful.
Some of them are character defining elements for those blocks. They're really, really important to the people that live there, and people associate them with the Lacombe aesthetic, those elm covers and such.
G, just wanted you to speak to G, because that's another new one that you didn't speak to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't put a mark beside that. Trail asset prioritization. So right now we have an outdated asset prioritization map for trails that was very reactive and actually really developer driven. The council allocating much more regular funding to the maintenance of trail assets. There's a need to update that and make sure that we're spending those in a rational and consistent way. So again, sort of taking a similar approach to what we've taken with roads to trails rather than an ad hoc map that is 6 years old and doesn't reflect the current maintenance costs or available resources. So that is a 2024 plan. City Hall renovation project. Director Piché and I were talking about that today, and we will have a memo coming back to you for that. We completed the invitation to tender from pre-qualified contractors, or so we pre-qualified contractors, then we completed the invitation to tender, and there'll have to be further discussions if we're to move ahead with that. I mean, as a preview for that, I think we're looking at alternative paths of what council might want to do, because the bids came back over budget. No surprise there. Any questions on any other items on page 7? When we head to page 8, the new items include a revision of the cemetery policy. Many of the cemetery policies that you currently have are quite outdated, and I think there is a handful of them. There's several policies covering overlapping and interrelated items, and so we'd like to consolidate those just because of the nature of the cemetery management. It really does cover the entire city, from finance, who registers it at land titles and accepts payment, to the road staff digging the graves, to the park staff mowing. It covers all of our areas, and so it is a fairly comprehensive policy that we're working through and plan to have done by the end of the year. We are looking at the city's needs and location for an additional reservoir, water reservoir. That is something that's been within the city's offsite levy bylaw for some time, and we're looking at ways that we might be able to partner with Lacombe County to provide some reciprocal coverage and storage for both their development and ours, and maybe share costs in that. So we want to start on that project, and we plan to do that in Q2 of next year. One item that didn't appear on the strategic plan, but has been complete since, is the securing of administration and operations contracts for regional utilities, and that is a completed item. That, thank you for your work on that, and to your team. We were successful in acquiring that contract. We do have a payroll software upgrade underway, although this isn't a directly council linked item. Anytime that your pay structure for staff is affected or impacted in any way, it can be disconcerting for some staff, so we want to make sure you are aware of that. We are planning to go ahead with that in 2024. We've had internal working groups, and we're going to continue to involve staff as we go through. We are looking at completing a partner agency service inventory, and I put quotes around partner because there is some semantics there. Is Lacombe Police Service really a partner, or are they part of the organization? But we want to really start documenting the services that we're providing to interrelated agencies within the city. So that's FCSS, the library, the police service. There's a lot of groups right now that we have ad hoc and often undocumented, long-standing service agreements and practices, I guess I would say, that we'd like to document, make sure council is aware of, make sure council is supportive of, and have that in one document that says, well, what services are we providing to the Mary Seymour Library? For example, we don't have a lease agreement even with them right now. So we'd like to really get those together into one group. And we've started with the Lacombe Police Service in terms of IT. And actually, we've got a few other things that we've been documenting there. 2024 is the goal for that. But that's the goal for phase 1 for the Lacombe Police Service. I expect this will be a multi-year thing. Parking lots, just that we had included the parking lots in the request for expressions of interest that was posted in 2022, and that is complete. Any questions on page 9? Oh, I think I went through page 8 and 9 there, sorry.
Councillor Dallas?
Oh, thank you. Section A, established organizational service levels, says was declined in 2020, no resources in 2023, and it is on hold for now. Is there kind of an indication that that is something we should plan for the future here, or is that?
I think you should plan for it for the future if you see it as a gap that is affecting residents now. I guess I would say I have always struggled with service level inventories, or sorry, as the establishment of organizational service levels, because it's invariably incomplete and inaccurate by the time you finish it, because things are always changing. And so it becomes something that I struggle with the value sometimes. You're bringing in a consultant to do it. It's often quite costly, and I don't know that it adds value for residents. But we've also never had it here, so it's tough for me to say, oh, there's no value. I've never worked under an organization that has it. I also think we're providing pretty good service without it, but sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No,
yes, resources would be needed.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for that answer.
On page 10, there is no new items, but there are 2 new items on page 11. First is wrapping up as we speak. That's the 2023 municipal census. So that is good. And the other item was the potential implementation for clean energy improvement, for the Clean Energy Improvement Program. Council did provide direction at the March 14th, 2022 meeting to bring forward in the next strategic plan update an item to develop a clean energy improvement program implementation plan. And so we're proposing that right now for 2025 by the end of the year. And that's in recognition that the program is far oversubscribed. There's communities that are waiting in line already. And so why not wait and see how it goes before we actually make a plan to implement it.
Councillor Gullickson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Creasy. Can I get a little clarification on that? Is that projects, or is that things we would implement within the city's operations to improve our footprint?
So the Clean Energy Improvement Program is actually sort of Alberta's version of what's called the PACE legislation. And it's where the municipality actually provides financing for approved green energy. It's not just green energy. Green projects, energy saving projects through certified installers that the municipality would actually attach to the tax roll on land titles an obligation to pay back these finance things. So you can make, simplistically, you put $10,000 of solar panels on your house, the municipality lends you the 10,000 and says you owe me $1,000 plus interest per year for 10 years. And if you sell the house, that obligation goes with you. But that way it's not being financed by you. It's actually being financed by the municipality. And in theory, the offsetting energy savings might pay for the payment. So council did consider that and said, well, let's see how it goes elsewhere. Why be the front runners of this?
Just curious, do you have any updates on the census? I know we were a couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were in the 90 percentile range. So Director Piche, do you have any information on that?
Yes, we have 98.2% completed. So we just have about 1.8% left, and it's just the cleanup. And then we have until June 20th to finish that cleanup.
All right.
So.
Any numbers you're willing to share yet?
Not yet.
We're growing.
All right, that's good.
It's higher than before.
Well, we can't be one of the 10 fastest growing cities in Alberta and not be growing. So that's fairly safe assumption, but.
Thank you. There's just some quality assurance stuff that has to be finished. That's why I hedged there. We'll have the real number in weeks. Page 12 and page 13 actually are not new items. So unless there's questions about them, I will probably move on to the new sections. So page 14 has a number of new items, most of them. The first is an internal report that we're looking at for ourselves, and that is looking at artificial intelligence and what that might mean for the work we do here at the City of Lacombe, both threats that there might be and opportunities that we might be able to make use of it to better serve residents. And we're working with that. Our IT staff is working on that for this year. Director Thompson's water utility is going to be completing another water audit of the 2022 numbers. So that would be a continuation of the work that was done in 2022 on the 2021 numbers, just to make sure we're getting that baseline and consistently looking at where we can improve and where the value from us to improve might be. And this says 2023 Q2, but I would hazard a guess that Q3 will probably be a more realistic target to complete that. We're also looking at a database of our water meters, and I believe we are actually down to, yes, just 2 water meters that are still showing up as showing consumption within the city, but they're not actually registered on any accounts tied to accounts. So this is a continuation of that data cleanup process that we've been going through for, so it's a testament to great work by the staff that they've been able to really narrow down. If you remember, our initial was 900 that we had of sort of some unknown questions about their usage and stuff. And so we're really honing in on that now. Just great work. Council may be aware that there was a push to move to e-ticketing province-wide. That was, well, they even said it was poorly consulted on and communicated, and so at the last minute it was pulled back. We had been geared up to go ahead with e-ticketing to meet the original deadline, and so we did proceed through with some of those e-ticketing things, and actually believe it's up and running now, just in the last couple of weeks.
E-ticketing for what purpose?
So you could pay your tickets online rather than coming into the administration building and paying it as the added insult. You get to make a free trip into City Hall. And both it was inconvenient for residents, and it does lead to, it really paves the way for some negative staff citizen engagements, because they're coming here, they're already frustrated. While you're here, you might as well give someone a piece of your mind. And so it would often end with these non-productive encounters for our staff. So we think that is going to help actually. Over this winter, we actually have completed this item, but over the winter, staff went through an exercise of attempting to match up the advertised businesses within the city of Lacombe on Google specifically with the registered businesses that are approved in Lacombe and have building permits. So you can see approximately 70 of them were, or sorry, 50 of them had no license in place. And so we've been working with them to clean those up. In many cases, the business had closed or, wasn't operating anymore, but certainly there were dozens that were not playing by the same rules as other businesses that are in the same field. So thanks to the bylaw staff for going through that. I'm sure lots of fun phone calls that took place. A recycling update, and this was just about us moving ahead with the extended producer responsibility. We wanted to kind of document that work had happened. It was effort both by council and administration, and it was successful effort. So that was just really good to complete. Any questions about the page 14 or 15 items? There's 3 new items on page 16. The first is a software issue that we've been working on. Again, this isn't really a council thing, but we would like you to know this is an issue we've been dealing with for, I guess, 4 or 5 years now, where we're having some software integration problems that do cause extra work for staff, both in terms of booking facilities of the city and then the financial side afterwards. And so we're hoping to get resolution here, but it may be that if we're not able to, that we end up having to do a system switch for the city's booking and recreation management software. I don't anticipate that being the issue, but this is taking quite a bit of a few staff members' time to rectify this. City continues on its paperless journey. The SharePoint project is a big part of that. And so over the past 6 months, you can see the list of departments that have been moved on to a cloud-based document management system. And that continues with us targeting by Q1 next year to have engineering, streets and roads and common services. And that'll be the vast majority of our departments then, the paperless and cloud-based, I shouldn't say paperless, cloud-based document management system, where now we have an on-site, it's backed up into the cloud, but it's kind of the same type of folder hierarchy and structure that was originally developed by Director Piché in a while back, a long time ago.
I have to give credit actually to past CAO Robert Jenkins. He's the one who actually developed it. We worked together, but he developed it, and that was back in the 90s.
So we're happy to see this moving ahead. It is some disruption as you go through because, of course, people have to learn new processes and where are their documents, and we don't want to be transferring over stuff that's out of date, and so there's all sorts of data cleanup happening. Council did receive a crosswalk improvement plan tied to our active transportation strategic objective. I believe you, on February 27th, received a report on how we evaluate the need for crosswalks and what those crossing treatments ought to be in a repeatable, comprehensive way. And so, again, we just wanted to acknowledge the work and say it was complete. That was something that council moved ahead during this term with supporting active transportation in the community. Any questions on those page 16 items?
Just want to refresh my memory on this, on the Perfect Mind issue. Was that software initially brought in because it interacted with the gate at the pool, or is that a different?
Part
was part of it?
That was part of it. I think the biggest part was actually the county was having some questions about documenting the ratio of use between county residents and city residents. And this was to give us an opportunity to gather that information and report on it consistently. That need has kind of fell by the
Yeah, it's gone.
wayside because the ICF has been signed for a 5-year thing and we just froze the numbers as they were. So it's really, at this point, there's functionality there wherein someone ought to be able to book rooms and make a lot more online engagements with the city than they really are. Often with the existing software, you get to a spot where you think you're about to click to book something and it says, call the city at this number to do the booking. And then we are getting some issues with reconciliation at the month's end in terms of how it accrues the outstanding. Yeah, thank you. The deferred revenue. It kind of holds it in a ghost account rather than tying into our VATM software. And so I've gone into too much detail already. It makes it difficult to reconcile. And so there's manual entries that have to be done at the end of every month for every city facility that's using this software.
Okay, I guess not to be quite that in-depth about it, but that is the system that I was thinking about. And I don't know that it was necessarily the first choice, but it was one made because of the interaction with that accounting software for the, so I mean, if it gets to the point where the effort to make changes is not worth it, then I think we need to perhaps look at considering something that's more compatible with the overarching software and make it online user-friendly, because that's really, from what I can tell, that's the single biggest advantage of it now anyway. And if we're not gleaning that, well, why are we putting up with the grief?
Yeah, I very much agreed. The issue we had when we went to market 5 years ago, I guess it's probably more than that now, it's probably more than 5 years, was there was actually only 2 competitors, and basically one's great for booking the LMC, but not the arena, and vice versa. They don't, and weren't they owned by the same company, or one bought the other one now or something?
Yeah, I think one just went bankrupt. So I think there's really only one option.
The other one we were going to go with actually went bankrupt, so it would have been even worse than this. There is no items on page 17, but if you have any, oh, sorry, there is one. The South Connector Functional Plan, and I believe that Councillor Hibbs has already been meeting with the team, thank you, to advance this project. So this, we just wanted to include it and note that that's work that both council and administration and our regional partners are doing. And I think it's good work, but it does take effort.
I have a, CEO Gowdy, I have a question regarding the explore demand and viability of future public transportation. Has any consideration been given to Wolf Creek's school division's problem with busing within our community to see if Connects might be a way of supporting them and making it a little bit easier from them to transition to the new rules?
So not yet, but I, unless that, thank you. I did see your comment when I returned today, and I am going to be following up with Director Lapointe to talk about that administratively with them and see if there is, if it's a non-starter or it's something worth further exploring, because if we can get more efficient or more efficient use of our system and it can tie in with that, that would be great. We'd love to see that. There are no new items on page 18, but page 19 is all new items. So maybe I'll present those and then ask for both pages. The first is part of that partner service agency inventory. One of the high priority outstanding ones we see is the need for a library lease. There is no formal agreement between the City of Lacombe and the library for use of the space down at the LMC. But of course, I think that is seen as an integral part of that facility by the community. And so we should document that, even just to make sure the City of Lacombe is being properly acknowledged for its full contribution to the cost of running the library. Right now, that's kind of an estimated cost that's carried in there. Now, when I say it's urgent, the building was built in 2007 and it's existed without a lease until now. So it's something, it's important, maybe urgent isn't the right word though. So we're looking at that by the end of next year is the plan. The EPR advocacy, that is done. And so we just include that. Sorry, did I misspeak about the other advocacy one then? Or did it just appear in two spots? Oh, sorry. Well, yes, this EPR advocacy one, that was successful. That was the one I was speaking of earlier. And we had also talked with the Wolf Creek Public Schools. Joint advocacy isn't really quite the right term, but improving the relationship and providing opportunities for joint advocacy on things that are important for both the Wolf Creek Public Schools and the City of Lacombe. We did have that meeting recently, a supper meeting with them, the first I'm aware of, and it has been successful. So that, I think that was Councillor Hibbs's suggestion, and that's worked out really well because we've gotten some momentum on potential agreements that have been languishing for some time that I think are potentially really good for the community. So that actually worked really well. And we just wanted to document it. Any questions about items on page 18 or 19?
Councillor Dallas?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yes, in regards to the library lease, I appreciate it showing up in here promptly. It was just some discussions from our committee meetings, and it's, you know, I think we understand that the dollar value put in goes towards the lease, but in regards to financial planning for the library itself, it would be a benefit so that they can understand how to allocate their funds as well that are in their bank accounts for whether it's improvements or for services provided. So thank you.
Yeah, good. I'm going to move on to the last section, the last two sections. So page 20 has no new items. Page 21 is also all existing items. Excuse me. Largely related on page 21 to some of the community standards bylaw work that has occurred over the last year. And so we wanted to provide those updates for you. Sorry, any questions on the items on page 20 or 21?
Chief Gotti, only because it has to do with some of those items in there, where we at with the process of hiring a new fire chief. Because of the existing fire services agreement we have with the Lacombe County, and of course, one of the items here is the updating the fire services agreement, and I believe a meeting has been set actually with the group. The current fire services agreement requires involvement of the county in that process, and so that just takes a little bit longer, but that process is underway. We've talked to the county, we've scheduled some interviews, or blocked off some times for interviews. We're accepting resumes, and we hope to have moving ahead sooner than later, but we want the right person, of course. Okay. Page 22 has no new items. I do want to highlight this issue with CP Rail. So because it has taken some time to complete their upgrades, that actually is going to necessitate a revisiting of the whistle cessation requirements, the report that we previously did on their behalf, to make sure that no new issues have arisen in the time when we have been waiting for the upgrades to complete. So that is a frustration, but I want you to know it is still moving ahead. Unfortunately, it's a timeline that's not entirely in our control, and so we would have hoped it was done by now, as I know many members of council would, but it is still moving ahead. It hasn't fallen off entirely. On page 23, we have 4 new items. The first is the fire service level agreement scope of practice, which I just mentioned. We're moving ahead with that right now. The fire services bylaw review and update of
of course, will be subsequent to that. And so I anticipate that work going ahead right after we complete the fire service level agreement work with the county. Mayor Creasy, earlier you were asking about updates specifically related to enforcement of parking on private property. That's contained in the traffic bylaw. And so we do have that identified for this year as a priority to complete in 2023. That is one of them. And I think there was a handful of other updates, and those are actually already documented. It's just a matter of working through the process. So it is underway.
Excuse me, CEO Gowdy, on the traffic bylaw, are they also looking, they say streets and roads, and the Lacombe Police Services service will determine changes to be recommended. Are they looking at speed too?
Not at this time, but certainly when that comes to council, that would be a discussion that could be had for sure. Flood study. So Alberta Environment and Parks has kicked off the expansion of some of their floodway mapping within the province, particularly within urban areas. And so they've had a lot of success with mapping some of the larger areas and getting basin-wide stormwater release rates adopted by communities. That has resulted in streamlined application processes and approvals beyond the one-by-one process that used to be in place. And so they're looking to expand that specifically to Lacombe. It would affect the, can you just remind me the Wolf Creek Basin, not the Whelp Brook. But we are asking them to look at including that in a subsequent one, and that our study, and that has begun and it'll continue through to 2024. And that's led by the province, but of course we're interested and engaged parties in the process.
So CEO Gowdy, with that mapping, is that primarily geared towards development along that identified area, or will it also include the areas that are for restricted flow, namely the QE Hut 2 and those types of structures that are problematic with the outflow?
I did ask them about how the methodology here will differ from their previous mapping. I would not expect that there will be significant, that they will highlight restrictions that may or may not be caused by provincially owned infrastructure. However, the original mapping, I think, was completed in 1996 and then adopted in 2006, and it primarily relies on, actually at the time, hand calculations. Modeling was not at a stage where there was comprehensive 3D computer models. And so it is a very crude and often conservative approach to modeling. I suspect that when they apply a computerized model, there will be a potential to reduce the impacted areas. Having said that, the province has many times in the past said to me, we'll only ever expand the protection areas. We're not going to reduce protection areas because that puts us at liability potentially if something happens in those protected areas. So once we've already gone through the work of essentially sterilizing land through land use applications, I don't think that they're going to open those up. Specific to the restrictions potentially caused by culverts under highways, which is something that has affected us before, I think if this mapping demonstrates that those still exist and are significant chokeholds, it would give us something current to go back to the province and say, look, this is sterilizing some prime development land. It's preventing us from having increased density in the city. Can we work with you to look at that, whether that's expanding those culverts or other means?
That's good to hear, because that really is the only thing to be gleaned from this for us. The geography has not changed since the last time it was done. Whether or not they choose to use 3D modeling or not, that's great. But unless there's some foreseeable benefit to it. This is kind of a nothing for us.
Yes. If we weren't engaged, there is a possibility where things actually, not only is it nothing, it's actually detrimental, where they say, well, actually, we'll buy it really conservative. And so we're working with them to make sure that doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Just before we move on, sorry, just to go back to the traffic bylaw review, just something that came up, I guess it was over the weekend. There were some questions about e-scooters. So not the, the moped style, but the, like the Neuron ones, but personal use. So of course that is actually quite a complex issue when you start looking into it, the difference between the rules that are around rental e-scooters and personal e-scooters. So I would just put that out there, as I know that there's some resolution coming forward, so potentially some changes happening in the fall. So, the timing of this is very good, but I would certainly make note of that as something that should be kind of looked at when drafts are being made. I do think it's all well and good to default to whatever the provincial rules are, but I think it is very helpful for our residents to have it at least mapped out, even in the bylaw, as to how they can find out. It just trying to find the answer for them was actually quite complicated. And I'd like to give accurate information always. Another thing that I feel like could be addressed in the traffic bylaw, because I don't believe that it is a little more differentiation, especially now that we have a lot more e-bikes being popular. So again, drawing the distinction between the odd gas-powered one that's out there, and the rules that are around that usage versus an e-bike, where it can be used, where it can't be. I just think that there would be a lot of benefit to sort of clarifying how these different modes of, getting around are meant to be handled in our community, because they can differ. Sometimes you have what's good all over the province, and then you have situations where each municipality is different. And I think that we should be really clear on that so there isn't confusion. I think people want to comply if they can, but they need to have that information handy. So I would just offer those as some suggestions.
It is interesting how different personally owned e-scooters are in regulation than corporately owned rideshare scooters that are regulated by the municipality. You would think they would be very, very similar, but they're not actually the same. So yeah, I've noted that as well.
Councillor Connick?
And just further to those comments, I'm glad you brought that up, Councillor Hibbs. Just if there's some further clarification coming on four-wheeled scooters, chairs. I had an interesting individual just pull a U-turn in front of me today, and I had to hit the brakes, and I thought that was, anyways, there's a lot of them on the road too. Thank you.
Definitely. Probably 8 months ago, I approached AB Munis and Alberta Transportation about this very thing, because in the States, actually, there's lots of regulation around low-speed electric vehicles. That's a class of vehicle that is, you can insure it, you can regulate it. There are provinces in Canada that do that. Alberta has not chosen to get into that, and at that time, they had no plans or interest in getting into the regulation of low-speed electric vehicles, which surprised me, because I think there's a wave of them coming as they become cheaper, more reliable, more accessible, and the cost of running a vehicle becomes higher and higher. I think they will be more attractive for people. Definitely. So I'm moving on to the last page, and there the majority of the items are new. The first was the establishment of a fully accessible playground at Trinity Crossing. And of course, the RFP has closed, and I believe they've reviewed, and there's some exciting proposals, designs, I should say, that are going to be constructed this year.
Should start this fall, and the site work is underway at this moment.
Very good. Of course, the water slide RFP, we came to council and gave some an update there at a previous meeting, and we are going through that consultation as directed right now. Council received a census series, and even though this wasn't a task that was ongoing when we did the strategic plan, we hadn't connected it to council's strategic plan in the past, and so we did want to identify that we feel it's important for council to be having up to date, the most accurate information about what the community makeup is and what's affecting the community, what the income levels are, what the education levels are. And so we did actually complete the 4th in that series over the past year. And so we're looking forward to the next time that there's data available so we can repeat that for council at that time. Right now on the Elizabeth Lake Stabilization Trail project, I believe we are just undertaking some biological surveys and waiting for a response from the lands office there, hoping to move ahead with the project as soon as possible. But as soon as possible is, from my understanding with our engineer, I think it's 2025. Is that right? Yeah.
The timeline has varied over the years. Based on the province.
That's right. And so we've had, I want to say change in responses, but it's been a learning experience where the involvement of the Historical Resources Act, and there's actually many more departments that have become involved than we originally had anticipated. And so it's been a slower project than we thought. It is still moving ahead. Right now, we're awaiting a response from the province of Alberta and for ourselves to complete some biological surveys that can only take place in the spring and early summer. So hopefully we get some good results from those surveys this year that let us move ahead. The remaining items are, that completes the entire plan. There's 7 more pages here, but those are the complete items, which were already included in this 24-page one. In the future, those 7 pages will be stripped out and you'll have, in theory, like a 17-pager and a 7-pager of complete things. So I know that is a lot of information. We are open to try and answer any questions, or we're open to whatever discussion or feedback you might have on this. What you might think about this is kind of the first time we've provided an update in this format. It's more comprehensive than we have in the past. I hope that had value. If not, let us know, because there is work to do it. But we're just open to whatever direction you might have for us.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you. I thought it was very clear. I appreciated this new style of from, I don't like bottom up, but from that more people can contribute to the plan. That seems great. Just on the list of completed items, some people may be looking at this and see that the actual target date was 2024 or something, but obviously it's already done, which I'm trying to find it now that I just saw that one. I think it had to do with one of the financial reviews, but just your defense of that would be, it just worked to do it now rather than when it was stated, or?
Yeah, so the tax incentive bylaw,
There,
that might be
thank
one.
you. Yeah.
So that we had always planned, and originally we had planned for 2024, but then we had a request from some developers to say, you know, other communities are looking at this, and we saw, I talked to staff on an open lane. There's an open lane to do this in a much easier way than if we wait and do it at a different time. And so we were able to connect with those students at MacEwan University, and it kind of came together that the conditions were right to make that a much easier process and more valuable potentially than if we did it, if we had said, well, too bad, developer, that's a 2024 thing. We're not going to consider it right now. Instead, we say, well, okay, this is something we're hearing about. Council is hearing about it. Let's advance it. So you won't see a lot of those. I'm not, don't usually finish things years in advance when we said we would, but sometimes it works out that way. Yeah.
Councillor Dallas, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess, you know, I review this and then it just reminds me that I'm very grateful that I get to be in this position and get to be a part of some of these decisions. And then, you know, I go to an event on the weekend and, you know, everyone's like, oh, thank you for coming. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, great. I'm really happy to be here. I'm so grateful. But this just, you know, it reminds, and I think it should remind all our citizens too how grateful they should be to have great leadership on the city from everybody in this room and then everybody who works below that, because this is extensive and complicated and takes a lot of time. And it's just, I'm always happy. So, yeah, so thank you.
We really appreciate hearing those comments, and we'll make sure that they are passed on to the many staff who are involved in doing it. Again, we're almost just coordinators of a lot of this. So we'll make sure they hear that. Thank you very much.
One item that I didn't hear in here was we had spoke about ECHO and customer attraction and how I think perhaps some of that onus is being given to the organization itself now that it's kind of on its feet and whatnot. But I still think it's in the city's best interest for us to remain involved in promoting that and encouraging, especially new accounts, to get on board with that delivery. Where are we at with it?
So it only, you're accurately anticipating part of my answer is that, well, that actually lies in their strategic plan, and so they've covered it. Having said that, Director Lapointe and I were just talking today, and you'll be receiving a report sometime over the summer. One of the most important ways that the city supports the acquisition of new customer accounts is by providing the prudential that backstops the financial obligation for that account. We're in the fortunate position where actually I think the $350,000 that we had previously put as a letter of credit has been, I don't know, used up or whatever, not used up, allocated, thank you. And so we are actually increasing that to make sure that there is sufficient credit for ECHO to go out and acquire new accounts. And I think they're on track for some really good numbers this year. So.
That is correct. And I will say that that is actually coming forward next meeting. So
Wonderful.
not sometime this summer, next meeting.
Well, that certainly wasn't planned. I just think it's one of the few ways that people can voluntarily participate financially in growing their community, and we need to continue with it. So I look forward to that next report. You may have anything else? We do appreciate that report, CA Gotti, on the strategic plan update. We know it does take awful lot of man hours and meetings and whatnot, and it's appreciated the time and effort that goes into it. I don't believe we have any in-camera items. However, next meetings I will go through here. The first two are regular council meetings, both at 5:30 p.m. here on June the 12th, and then the following month, July 10th. And then on Monday, August 14th, committee of the whole meeting, once again, 5:30 here. So a relatively light load for the next 2.5 months, but please put those dates in your calendars. I believe that is everything for this evening. Unless we'd just like to hang out. Councillor Hoekstra?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you very much.
Why not?
Whatever the heck the time is here, that is 7:36 by my clock. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.